Chapter 20. Hans was pleased. The group of men he had put together were more than capable and had so far offered up no resistance to his leadership, except for the Duke of Wesselton's men. Those two, he thought now, glancing back at the men, are going to be trouble unless I figure out a way to change their loyalty. For the moment, though, Hans was content to just wait and see how things played out. It would do him no good to focus his attention on anything other than finding Anna. They had been following Anna's tracks for a few hours. At first, it hadn't been too difficult. Her horse had left a clear path of broken branches on its gallop back toward Arendelle, but they had come to the point where Anna and her horse had clearly parted ways. A distinct human-side impression could be seen in the white powder beneath the tree, and the tree itself was one of the few without snow covering its branches. She must have fallen off here, Hans thought, jumping off his own horse to examine the area. Yes, she most definitely landed beneath this tree. He reached up, his fingers brushing the soft needles of the fir tree. She was probably stunned, Hans said to the men who sat astride their horses, waiting, but then she would have tried to stand up. He lay down on the ground, reenacting the scene as he saw it play out in his head. She would have used these branches for support. They would have been covered in snow and hanging low to the ground, you see. When Anna grabbed on, the snow would have been knocked loose, which is why the tree looks bare now. And then what would my Anna have done? His voice trailed off as he looked around. Hans loved that the men were all looking at him, seemingly awed by his impressive tracking skills. The only problem was, he actually wasn't very good at tracking at all. He had just been following the horse's path up to this point. The heavy beast had left plenty of clues to follow, but now he would have to follow Anna, and she was far more delicate than the horse. "Sir," one of the men called out, "could she have gone this way?" Looking over, Hans let out a soft breath. The man was pointing at tracks in the snow. They were barely visible, but they were clearly those of a human. Following them, Hans saw that they led away from the tree and toward a small stream, and in the distance, rising up over a small hill, was smoke. "Princess Anna must be over there," Hans shouted, jumping back on his horse. Kicking the horse into a trot, he headed toward the smoke. Behind them, the jingle of bits and stirrups let him know his men were following. A few minutes later, Hans found himself standing in front of a wood cabin. A small set of stairs led up to a porch and the front door. A sign reading, "Wandering Oaken's Trading Post," hung down, with a smaller sign attached that read, "And sauna." Hans smiled. "Hopefully Anna's inside. Then we can head back to Arendelle and get out of this wretched snow. And if she's moved on, well, perhaps someone inside knows where she's gone." "Men, you wait here. Keep an eye out while I go in and see if the princess is here," Hans commanded. Dismounting, Hans tied up his horse and moved toward the stairs. Then, thinking better of it, he paused and turned back. "You two," he said, pointing at the Duke's men, "you come with me." He didn't want them out of his sight. Hans walked up the stairs and pushed open the door. "Hello?" he called out. It took a moment for his eyes to adjust. The sun and the snow had been blinding. In comparison, the interior of the trading post was dark. Slowly, shapes began to emerge. He could make out shelves, dry goods, a door that, due to its steamy nature, had to lead to the sauna, and a mountain? Hans shook his head and blinked his eyes rapidly. When his vision cleared, he realized he wasn't looking at a real mountain. He was instead looking at a mountain of a man. "Hoo-hoo, big summer blowout," the human mountain said. He was standing behind the counter, his fingers drumming on the wood. "Perhaps you would like some sun balm of my own invention?" He held up a brown bottle and smiled hopefully. Hans smiled back, mimicking the man's expression. He was hopeful as well. But while this man was eager for a sale, Hans was eager for information. Glancing around the room, Hans quickly tried to get a sense of this huge man. "The more I know," he mused, the easier it is to manipulate." He quickly deduced several things. 1, the man had terrible taste in sweaters, and 2, he clearly fancied himself a businessman. While the first thing was only useful in that Hans now knew what sweater to never wear if you were a 7-foot man who was at least 3 feet wide, the second item was valuable. Businessmen were driven. They knew the worth of money, and they usually knew a good deal when they saw it. They also, Hans knew from experience, tended to do what was best for their business and themselves. While that character trait might not always win them friends, in this situation, it was certainly going to help Hans get what he wanted from the man. "Hello there," Hans said, approaching the counter and holding out his hand. "I am Prince Hans of the Southern Isles. I am looking for someone and hoping you might be able to help me." The big man's smile did not grow bigger or smaller. It stayed exactly the same. He was clearly not impressed with Hans's title. "I am Oaken," he said. "Would you like some pants without legs?" My own invention. Half price? Maybe some for you two big fellas?" He waved to the Duke's men, who were standing back stone-faced. Hans shook his head. "We're actually all set for pants," he said. "We just stopped in because I have reason to believe that my beloved Princess Anna may have stopped in here not so long ago." "Ah, love," Oaken said. "That is nice. Maybe you will be wanting some books on love? I have many." Hans grimaced. "I am sure your selection is wonderful, but I don't really need any books. What I do need is my beautiful Princess Anna." Hans's voice trailed off as Oaken remained impassive. This was getting him nowhere. Fine. I would love a book." Instantly, Oaken's blank expression disappeared and was replaced by a huge grin. "Hoo, that is good. Of which story would you like?" Hans could feel the Duke's men watching him, judging his inability to get an answer, and it infuriated him. He didn't want anyone to see him as ineffectual, especially the Duke's men, who would be all too happy to report their observations back to the man who sent them. But he hadn't trusted them alone outside, so now he was stuck with them as witnesses to what was turning into a colossal headache. Hans clenched his fist. "Businessman," he reminded himself. "Oaken is a businessman, so why don't I do a little business and see where that gets me?" Clearly, the big man was obliging when people were buying things, so Hans would just have to buy things, lots of things. "Oaken, on second thought," Hans said, mirroring the big man's grin, "I do think we will take some pants without legs." Hans scanned the store, looking for more things to purchase. "Oh, and some carrots. The horses would appreciate carrots, I'm sure." "Whoo!" Oaken cried, pleased with his sudden windfall. He began to bag up the items. As he held up the carrots, he added, That is true. Horses do enjoy tasty treats. So do reindeers. In fact, I just sold some carrots to a pretty girl with a white streak in her hair a few hours ago." "A girl with white in her hair," Hans repeated. "She was here? Why didn't you say so in the first place?" "That is the princess. My princess." Oaken shrugged. "Apologies." Then he held up a bag. "Perhaps you would like a bag, yeah?" Hans looked at his breath as he tried to remain calm. I don't care. He threw a large pouch of coins on the corner. "Please just tell me where the girl went." Picking up the pouch, Oaken emptied it on the counter and began to count the coins very carefully. She bought some supplies for that sneaky ice harvester," he said, "and then they left for the North Mountain." He finished counting and handed Hans's change. "Have a good day." Mumbling a thank you, Hans turned and headed back outside in a bit of a fog. It didn't make sense. Anna had left the store with another man. Who was he? Was someone else trying to win Anna's hand in the throne? Well, that man had no idea what he was up against. Hans hadn't made it this far to walk away without a fight. "Sir?" The sound of one of his men's voices broke into Hans's internal monologue. Looking around, he saw that everyone was waiting on his orders. "I just learned, after a quick and easy interrogation, that Princess Anna has gone to the North Mountain." He ignored the Duke's men, who both raised their eyebrows, and instead pointed at a group of the townsfolk who had volunteered. "Let's split up. You 5 go west and look for a way up to the mountain. The rest of us will go east. With luck, we shall meet atop the North Mountain and rescue Princess Anna." Hans held back to make sure that both groups seemed sure of where they were going. When he was certain, Hans kicked his horse forward. Coming up behind the Duke's men, he was surprised to hear his name. He pulled back on the reins. "Did you see him trying to get answers from that big oaf?" the taller one said. "It was pathetic. If the Duke were here, he would have had the guy talking in no time." The shorter man twirled his long mustache and his fingers and laughed. "He would have had him screaming in no time, you mean?" he said gleefully. The rest of the men's words were lost to Hans as the wind picked up and the pair trotted ahead, but he had heard enough. "So the Duke would have to resort to violence? How ironic that his men are calling me the idiots, when clearly he doesn't have the forethought to think about what reacting calmly and rationally can achieve. True, violence could work, but only brutes use violence. Brutes like his brothers, who wouldn't have known how to talk out a problem if they put all their brains together. Hans couldn't count the number of times he had tried to find the peaceful way out of a situation, only to find himself being pummeled, or stuck in the pigsty, or thrown off a moving cart, and his father had been no better. His solution: when one of his farmers had a problem, he didn't like having been to burn the man's barn down, or take all his livestock. It never failed to surprise Hans that a man who ruled such a vast kingdom could be so stupid. Violence begat violence. It was inevitable. Yet that was all his family knew. Hans shuddered. No, he had had enough violence to last him a lifetime. He would not sink to his brother's level. He would not let himself be like them, not if he could help it. So maybe a well-thought-out plan didn't yield the swiftest results. It still yielded one eventually. Hans nodded, reassuring himself. Yes, I got what I wanted. I know where Anna is heading, and I know I can get more information from Oaken if I ever need it in the future. The same could not be said if the Duke had dealt with it himself. Looking ahead, Hans watched the two men who had so easily mocked him, so they didn't respect him. That was fine. It just meant that their guard was down and that they wouldn't interfere with his plans. But if they did, well, while he didn't favor violence, it could certainly have its benefits when used wisely.